Right, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Training for Hiking live Q&A. As always, my name is Rowan, and today I'm answering your questions around training for hiking. Now, the way these live Q&As work, as always, is if you are watching live, you do have any particular questions you would like covered, feel free to pop them into chat, and I'm more than happy to help. On top of that, I've also had a few questions that have been sent through to me prior, which I'm going to be working through. And we're going to be talking through a little bit about the difference between diaphragmatic breathing and nose breathing. We're going to talk about managing feet for long distances and also building confidence for longer walking. So I'm going to talk through a little bits and pieces on that. As I said, anyone watching live who does have any questions, feel free to fire away and we can take it from there. So the first question I had sent through was talking about, diaphragmatic breathing versus nose breathing. And this was from a question from someone who's recently signed up on our breathing drills for hikers mini course, which you haven't seen before. It's just a simple mini course talking through some basic foundational breathing strategies which can help hikers on the trail. And essentially, this particular question was asking, does diaphragmatic breathing need to be in through the nose, out through the mouth, or can it be done all through the mouth? Other videos focused on meditation or yoga often recommend in through the nose, out through the mouth, but I wasn't sure if this applied to hiking as well. I've tried some diaphragmatic breathing exercises just walking briskly around my neighborhood with no elevation, and I feel like I can't get enough oxygen when I try to do the inhales through my nose. And so I was asking about that. And there's a lot of different things that kind of go into this particular situation. And in all honesty, like before I even get into the specifics, there's no like right or wrong way in regards to this. You know, there's a lot of like benefits and situations where you can just breathe in any way you want. I'll talk you through my thoughts and how it relates to hiking specifically and the course that I was talking through specifically. But, you know, this isn't gospel. It's not wrong if you do different things or anything like that. It's just a different way of going about it. Now, to put things into context, what we are talking about is in my breathing drill for mini course, there's a bunch of different stuff we talk about. And as a foundational breathing topics that we talk about before we even get into courses, into the actual drills, we talk about these two techniques, diaphragmatic breathing and nose breathing. Now, to really simply talk through them, diaphragmatic breathing is essentially known as belly breathing, where when we're breathing in, as opposed to breathing into the chest and shoulders, we try to breathe a little bit deeper, feel the belly expand, and inhale and exhale, expand and contract, feeling it coming in the belly. Now, the reason why this is recommended is diaphragm is it is the most major breathing muscle. If we're breathing a little bit deeper and we're utilizing the diaphragm a bit more, it can be more of an efficient breathing technique as opposed to getting stuck in the chest and shoulders breathing, which isn't quite as efficient. So diaphragmatic breathing, often recommended for efficient breathing, in quotation marks, often recommended to help calm the body down, help de-stress people, used in a lot of different situations. Now, nose breathing is essentially another technique that we use talk through the course. And essentially, all that involves is breathing in and out through the nose. Now, there are a lot of different reasons why people often talk about nose breathing online, and a lot of different people will sort of talk about this topic. The reason I usually recommend it for hikers and why I use it in my training is it can be a good measure of intensity in the sense that when we are training for hiking and when we're hiking specifically, we typically want to, for the most part, be predominantly using our aerobic energy system, which is our energy system designed for long periods of exercise. It is our most efficient energy system. It uses, it will delay fatigue, and that's kind of what we want. Now, some hikers do find themselves in the situation in both their training and their hiking where they're actually pushed to higher intensities and they're working other energy systems. So in our training, we may be doing hill sessions or stair sessions or something like that, and we may spend the whole session just getting huffed and puffed and out of breath. Which, if we're intentionally trying to do that, can be beneficial. But if not, if we're just trying to develop our steady and ability to go and go and go, may not be amazing. The same thing as when we're actually out on the trail. If we're just huffed and puffed the whole time, we're going to be burning through our energy reserves very quickly. Fatigue is going to accumulate much quicker, as opposed to if we can be a little bit slower, a little bit steadier. So essentially, the whole idea around nose breathing, or one of the major ideas around nose breathing, is if we're sticking to a pace where we can constantly breathe in and out through our nose, this is going to keep us at a very low intensity, keep it as a very efficient intensity, which will allow us to go for further, for longer. Can take a little bit getting used to, can take a little while to develop, but that's kind of the idea around it. Now, coming back to the original question, it's like, okay, with this diaphragmatic breathing, does this all need to be done through the mouth or through the nose or whatever it may be? You can technically do diaphragmatic breathing in any way. You can do it through breathing in and out through the nose. You can do breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. You can do mouth to mouth. We can do that diaphragmatic breathing in any situation. So when we're looking at, say, meditation or yoga or whatever it may be, it doesn't really matter. If you're just doing it for kind of keeping you calm, keeping you present, whatever, it's all good. Now, if we're looking at linking this to our actual exercise, though, we do want to put a little bit more awareness around how we're doing it. Because typically, the way that we breathe and the way that we can manage to breathe, it does correlate with kind of the different levels of intensity of exercise. So, for example, in this situation where we can breathe in and out through the nose, typically, as we sort of said before, this is only really doable at our more lowest intensity. This is only really doable when we're going at an intensity where the body is very, very calm, very, very casual, and the intensity that we kind of want when we're hiking. It's not really realistic to do that at higher and higher intensities. And that is one of the reasons why we use it or recommend it as hikers, because it pulls us back. Now, as we do start to creep up the intensity and we do start to get a little bit quicker, then we may go into something where it's like nose mouth breathing, where we can breathe in through the nose and exhale through the mouth. A lot of people can sustain that at slightly more moderate intensities when we're doing quicker walking, when we're going up hills, and it's very manageable to sustain that for a lot of people when we're going a little bit quicker. And then when we get really, really quick and we're actually pushing really, really quick, that may not be sustainable anymore. And then we essentially have to go to the mouth breathing. That's kind of a ladder of a breathing where it goes from lowest intensity, we can do nose nose. Moderate intensity, a lot of people can do nose mouth. And then as we get to higher intensities, pretty much everyone has to go mouth mouth. Not to say you can't do mouth breathing at low intensities, but that's sort of like progresses. Now, as we sort of said before, during meditation-based movements, if you're just doing yoga, if you're just sort of doing like decompressing or anything, do whatever you want with this type of stuff. It absolutely does not matter. It is whatever's most comfortable. When we're looking at the hiking-based training, learning and practicing that nose breathing, sort of saying, hey, I can do this diaphragmatic breathing while I am doing this in through the nose, out through the mouth, is probably worthwhile. Because as you progress over time and as you develop this can be a really, really good measure just to keep you steady when you're hiking, keep you comfortable when you're hiking, keep you energy efficient when you're hiking. Now, realistically, when you're doing this type of stuff, nose breathing itself, in and out through the nose, can be really tough for a lot of people at first because a lot of people just have a habit of going pretty quick and it can be tricky. But it is a skill that can be developed and can be practiced. And if you practice it and work with it, you can get quicker and quicker and quicker. Initially, you may have to pull back your intensity to be able to do this and be able to go with this. And it can be a little bit frustrating for some people. They're like, oh my gosh, I've got to walk so slow to manage this. And it's just really, really difficult. But again, if you just be patient with it and practice with it, it really can go a long way. And in the original question, if you're in a situation where, you know what, I'm actually really struggling with brisk walking when I'm doing breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, well, it may be a case of saying, okay, nose breathing itself may be even harder. So I would sort of say just pull back the intensity a little bit, take it a little bit slower, practice this skill. In the breathing drills course, it actually talks you through a bunch of sort of steps of how to actually make this a little bit more doable. Oops, where am I? It talks you through like what to work through this and how to actually do it out and talk through stuff in a lot more detail. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. Um, coming down, where am I? Sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, and as I said, may need to pull back the intensity. With practice, it will get a lot easier. Now, the only caveat to all of this is some people will just realistically just have limitation through the nose, and maybe they just have like a really small nose. Maybe some people have a really restricted breathing through the nose or whatever it may be, or a blocked nose. In that situation, you don't have to get obsessive with it. You can just sort of say anytime we're talking about nose breathing, just stick to a conversation. So what that means is going at a pace where you constantly carry a conversation. So if you're going back to this original situation, you're walking briskly around the neighborhood and you're going at a pace where you actually couldn't carry a conversation and you're like, hey, I'll have to huff and puff in between words. Well, that means probably we want to pull back the intensity a little bit. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that was a little bit rambly, but hopefully that does kind of help. It's just sort of something where you just want to pull back the intensity, practice it, develop it, and over time it'll get easier, it'll be more manageable. You'll be able to go quicker and quicker and quicker, and be quite useful for you. So hopefully that helps. Now, next question I want to cover is talking about managing feet for long distances. And this question came through in our Facebook group the other day. And the question was, I'm wondering if you have any advice for managing feet for long distance walking. We're talking about 25 kilometers per day on distance of a big long hike in warm weather over a variety of descents, flat, varied surfaces, sometimes on unforgiving bitumen. How do you manage blisters, feet swelling, and general aches from tiredness? Which, yeah, this is a situation a lot of people get if you're doing these big long distance walks, especially when you do have to do a lot of like road walking in certain situations, can be a little bit tricky. So I'll talk you through a few openings. Now, I'm not going to be going into footwear or blister strategies. In all honesty, that's not my forte. There's definitely a lot of good information out there online that I don't really talk about that stuff myself. But what I'm going to talk you through is some simple things you can do around physical preparation and some simple other strategies which can help with this type of thing. Now, on the training side of things, main thing we want to think about is if we are leading into 25 kilometer per day on average, whatever it may be, we're worried about the feet. We want to think about how we can expose the feet to these type of stresses during our training to help them get a bit more comfortable. Because realistically, the feet will adapt to whatever we expose them to if we do it gradually enough and intentionally enough. And so if we can expose the feet to some of these challenges in your training, therefore it will get a little bit stronger, get a little bit more comfortable, be able to deal with those types of situations when we're on, as we're going through. So first and foremost, in your training, just make sure when you're looking at your walking training, looking at your hiking training, making sure that you are building up to being comfortable doing the max hours of walking. So what I mean by that is if you have an average of a 25 kilometer per day, but you know what, there are some days where you're like, hey, I'm actually going to be doing 7 hours of walking or 8 hours of walking or something like that. Well, in your training, you probably want to build up to that and make sure you're confident with that. Same thing with max pack weight. If you're carrying a 6 kilo pack, a 10 kilo pack, a 20 kilo pack, whatever it may be, you want to be confident that you can do both of those things together because we want to expose the feet to those stresses so that we challenge that, whatever it may be. So you may sort of say, okay, if I need to carry a 10 kilo pack on this trip, and my longest day is realistically going to be 8 hours, then towards the end of your training, 2 weeks before you go or so, you want to schedule in a hot training hike, which is going to take 8 hours with your 10 kilo pack. Expose the feet to that. And even if it's not day after day after day, this is obviously just a day hike and a training hike. We want to make sure as a bare minimum the feet are ready for that. And if we can build up slowly and surely and steadily and expose the feet to that, it'll make these type of things way more comfortable and reduce that general aches, reduce the blisters, even the swelling, potentially a little bit. Now, on top of that is if you do have the opportunity to test it on some of the surfaces, that's probably worthwhile. If you feel like your longest day is going to be on that bitumen track, and the longest day is going to be that, well, it may be worthwhile trying to get a bit of bitumen in your training. That may not be always realistic to get, and that's why I sort of say, if possible, those two things that are bare minimum you need to hit. But if you can get exposure to the similar surfaces, go with it. The same thing as if a lot of people in these situations will have road hiking, or they'll have beach walking, or they'll have whatever it may be. Trying to get exposures to those types of things can really help with the feet. So first and foremost, going with that. On top of that, make sure you're building up strength. Strength training and necessity in this type of situation. So beneficial for any hiker. Definitely make sure you're not missing out. Realistically, full body strength training, quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, this and that, always going to be beneficial. When we're talking about the feet specifically, just making sure you are doing plenty of work on the calves. You're doing calf raises, you're building up the strength, you're building up the endurance in those areas. If you're not doing that type of stuff, leading to an adventure like this, definitely get into it. If you're not sure how to go about that, we do have free resources available. Flick me a message, pop a comment on this video, let me know, I can sort you out. And then finally, on the training side of things, make sure you're also doing specific conditioning. And what I mean by that is if you're like, hey, I've got lots of descents, make sure somewhere you're doing some hill work in your training where you're finding a hill and going up and down, building that up. If you're aware that I've got lots of bitumen track or got lots of road walking, then do some sessions like that. Hop on your back, pack on your back, do some sessions, maybe a little bit quicker than usual, but just to get exposed to that type of thing. If you are coming up to if you're carrying a heavy pack, make sure you're doing lots of pack walking on all of that. Make sure you are practicing outside of your actual training hikes, specific conditioning. Now, for anyone who's followed my stuff for a while, you'll sort of see these things are pretty much what I recommend to everyone. Make sure you're building up your distance and your pack weight on your training hikes. Make sure you're building up strength. Make sure you're doing specific conditioning. Those are the main pillars that I recommend to every single hiker. Exactly the same in this type of situation, but just the specifics of it may change slightly. So training, very, very basic, but it will go a long way. Now, strategies, a few bits and pieces that can help with this and manage it. Really simple stuff, but it can go a long way. One thing that can help protect the feet is if we are going on these long distance walks and maybe we're doing lots of bitumen, maybe doing lots of rope walking, whatever it may be. One thing that we can often do is when we're doing lots of flat walking, is we end up just pushing a really quick pace. We end up kind of power walking because it's flat. We want to get through the kilometers. We want to kind of smash through it as quickly as possible. One thing with quicker walking is when we are pushing slightly quicker walking, it does put much more pressure through the feet. It's not a big deal all in all, but if you are looking at protecting the feet, this can be an area where you can very much make a difference. So if you're aware of this, if you've got lots of flat walking, just set yourself the target that if I ever catch myself going really quick on the flat, if I catch myself power walking, if I catch myself hustling, pull it back to my normal pace, pull it back to a normal pace of walking. You may need to continually remind yourself to do this, maybe because it's very, very easy just to go into that quicker walking. But I promise you that if you took anything out of this presentation, just giving yourself the cue to pull things back, it will make a massive, massive difference. So that's number one, slower pace on the flats. But the ups and downs typically will end up just self-regulated on speed anyway, because ups are hard, downs we don't want to fall over. But the flats typically where people just like, yeah, I'm going to make up time. So watch out for that. Another thing, trekking poles do often take a lot of pressure off the feet. Definitely recommended. If you are doing one of these long distance walks and got lots of different terrain, um, maybe worthwhile getting some that does have like an adjustable bottom or has like get the little caps you can pop on the bottom. So when you're actually on trail, you've got something that you can dig in and it works well enough. When you're on the road, you have something you pop on the little cap on, and it's not just the hard point going into the road, but it's like something a little bit more supportive. Very simple, but definitely does take a bit of pressure off the feet. One thing you can look into is, to help with the feet, if you've got feet swelling and general aches and pains, particularly if you're doing day after day after day, is just what you do after hiking. A lot of things you can do to help. One thing I quite like is like sports compression recovery socks. You don't have to wear these while you're actually hiking, but basically once you finish hiking, when you're in camp or wherever you're staying, just whack these on for an hour or two while you're hanging out. The idea behind the sports compression recovery socks and the idea why I like that is essentially when we're walking, when we're hiking, lots of blood moving around because we're exercising. What tends to happen? We stop moving, we stop hiking. That circulation calms down a little bit, gets a little bit slower. If we've done a lot of exertion, sometimes if we're just sitting around, we're just not doing much, that can lead to a little bit of achiness, that can lead to a little bit of swelling or whatever it may be. It's totally normal, but we can help that, we can aid that. This compression socks, the idea behind it is aids the circulation, keeps things moving around, can often help with that achiness, can often help with the swelling, can be quite nice. So you can get lots of brands out there. If you just go online and type in sports compression, let's say recovery socks. There's a million and one brands out there, and you may wear these for like 1 to 3 hours in camp before bed. And just whack those on can be really nice. You don't have to wear these while you're walking, because while you're walking, you've already got lots of circulation going. But this is more of a post-hiking thing. Very, very simple, but can make a big difference. And then on top of that, just some simple things you can do again afterwards to help the feet kind of bounce back afterwards. A little bit of self massage, a little bit of stretching on the calves, the shins, and the bottoms of the feet. So the calves are the back of the lower legs. They can often get very, very tight, often get very, very overworked. If we can take a bit of pressure off them, that can help the feet just be a little bit happier. The shins, front of the shins, doing a little bit of a self massage on that can often help. And then also on the bottoms of the feet as well, just doing some light massage, maybe a bit of stretching can often help. Now, when I say massage, really, really nice piece of kit that you can get is like a cork massage ball. These things will weigh like 5 grams or something. Leave it in your pack. Very, very nice just to do massage at the end of the day. But they're very, very light and they can often help. And spending 10 minutes doing this type of stuff every night or every evening can really, really go a long way. Now, if you want to get your hands on one of these, you can just go into Google, type in cork massage ball. There's a million and one brands these days. They're all exactly the same. It's just different branding on them. So you can check that out. So a few things in there. Make sure you're nailing your training. A few ideas in there, but that can often make a pretty big difference. So hopefully that answers your questions and hopefully that helps. And then finally, the last sort of question or the last sort of situation I want to cover was building confidence for longer walking. And this is specifically a situation which your hikers will find themselves in if they're kind of like reach a point where they're walking where they're like, I'm just not super confident in regards to pushing through the amount of distance. Maybe you get to a point like a point in the amount of distance, the amount of hours you're doing when you're like, I need to get further, but I'm not really sure about how to push through. And there's specific situations here as a comment I got from a hiker was like, look, I'm not really confident right now that I can increase my distance enough and then be able to do this on back-to-back walks. And the situation was they'd gotten to a certain point with their hiking and they were like, this kind of feels like the limit. And I don't really feel like I can kind of push through and, what can I do in this situation? And this does happen to a lot of people because a lot of hikers with their training, they'll go out, they'll do their hikes, they'll build up distance. They're like, hey, cool, that's fine. I'm building up my fitness, building up my endurance. It's not a big deal at all. But a lot of hikers out there, and this is typically for people who do have like a history of pain or injury or whatever it may be, sometimes we'll get to the point where we just feel like we just get stuck at certain distances. And we sort of maybe built up and we could do an hour hiking, and we could do 2 hours of hiking. But now looking at 3 hours of hiking, it's like, oh my gosh, I just can't get up to that. And it just feels insurmountable. And then the thought of it's going to get more and more and more if I've got a big adventure coming up, it can feel really, really tricky. And as a situation does come up a lot. And typically, what I say in this type of situation is if you do feel like you get stuck at a certain distance, a certain time, and you don't feel like you can push through anymore, one thing that I often say is like, look, don't fall into the trap of thinking if you are doing training hikes that you just have to hike and hike and hike nonstop. Because a lot of people will look at a 3 hour hike and they'll say, okay, I've got to go out and walk for 3 hours nonstop. Or I've got a 6 hour hike and I've got to go out and hike for 6 hours nonstop. That is my training. And some people do that fine, but realistically, this is not necessary. If you were looking at building up distance and you're stuck, I would fully recommend just break this down a little bit more. Because if you've got a 3 hour target, you want to hit 3 hours of worth of hiking, it doesn't matter if that takes you all day, realistically. If you build it up and break it down and and just break it up, that is perfectly legitimate approach to training. And you can still build up over time a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So a few ways to look at this. Let's use the hypothetical example of saying, let's use the 3 hour as an example. And so to say, okay, I ultimately need to get up to 6 hours worth of hiking. The last sort of month or so, I haven't really been doing a huge amount, and I've built myself up to about 2 hours worth of hiking. And I build up, build up, build up. Now I'm on 2 hours. I'm a little bit unconfident around how I can build up. What do I do? Well, a few situations. If you, number one, are like never not having any rest and you build up to the 2 hours and you say, hey, I don't have any rest and I can't build up anymore, well, just break it up. Schedule a rest every 1 to 2 hours. And obviously, in this situation, it would be scheduled 1 hour. If you're doing a 6 hour walk, you might just schedule a rest every 2 hours. That in itself can often break things up, just give you the recovery you need and help you push through. If you're already having short rest, quite often I'll talk to hikers and they'll be like, hey, I'm already resting. I'm like, how often are you resting? They're like, well, I just rest 5 minutes every couple of hours. Well, maybe it's worthwhile scheduling something a bit more significant. Maybe schedule a significant rest midway. Get midway through your hike, sit down, have a proper lunch, take 30 minutes and just chill out. Or maybe sit down and read a book or sit down and just take some time. You don't have to be like having these short, sharp rests. Break it up a little bit more. Or if you're sort of doing this and you're already breaking up lunch, then break it up even more. You can break this up literally as much as you want. In this 3 hour walk example, this is literally something I talked through with a client the other day. And I sort of said, look, if you're trying to build up to this 3 hour walk, maybe just schedule yourself out, walk for an hour, and make sure at the end of the hour there's a cafe or a park. Sit down, have lunch, have a coffee, chill out for 30 minutes. Then get up, and then walk for another hour and plan out after an hour that you're going to have another break point. Sit down for 30 minutes, read a book, take it easy, have another really long rest, and then break up and then go out and walk the final hour. And you can see in this situation, there's a big difference between breaking this up over, this may take 5 hours to do 3 hours worth of walking, but there's a big difference between this and just walking nonstop for 3 hours or whatever it may be. So you can apply this to many, many different situations, whether you're looking at a 3 hour walk, whether you're looking at a 12-hour walk, or whatever it may be. But just breaking it up a little bit more can just make things a bit more manageable, make things a little bit more doable, help you feel a bit more confident. And then once you've actually nailed that distance and you're like, yeah, cool, my body can handle that, then over time you can slowly reduce that rest. You can take out one of these rests, you can make them a little bit shorter, so you can get a little bit more moving time. And that's a perfectly legitimate approach to training. So, that is everything that I kind of had on my list today. If anyone watching live did have any particular questions they want covered, feel free to plug in a chat and I'm happy to help. But if nothing else comes through for today, we may wrap things up from there. For anyone watching in the future, if you did have any questions of any of this stuff, please feel free to flick me a message and let me know. If anyone does have any questions they want answered in future lives, let me know. Happy to break things down a little bit more and cover this in. The next live should be this Friday, where we'll be covering a few more questions or anything that comes through. But aside from that, I think I might wrap things up there. I'm about to lose my voice either way. Not great after a few days off of non-video, but what can you do? But yeah, for anyone watching live, thanks for being here. Hope you got a little bit out of it. For anyone watching the future, hope this helps as well. I hope everyone has a lovely, lovely day, and we'll talk to you all very, very soon. Bye.